So a few of you have been messaging in or telling me that you're really enjoying these little films that I'm making, and you know, that's pretty cool because that's the cherry on top and it keeps me going. But if I am completely honest, this next film may not be as interesting. So a few of you may be wondering why we don't just use normal standards like that guy there. Mother of God! So if you haven't seen part 1 of this 2-part series, probably should go and watch that first, because it may just fill you in on a couple of things you may not have realized. Well, now I'm just finishing off setting up one of these fodder beet paddocks. Now, as you can see here, we've got a lovely herd of calves here. They won't be eating this, but cows coming in about a week will be eating this, and we've had it tested and it's come back at actually quite surprisingly low yields, which we're quite disappointed at. So we're hoping for a lot of frost that'll bring that dry matter up in the fodder beet, and we could be able to hold the amount of cows that we're scheduled to hold. So just on how we set this paddock up, obviously here I'm just pulling out what we call the safety fence. Now we've got our primary fence, I guess you'd call it, the front fence. That has got electrified hot standards on it. We protect this stuff from the cows, if you will, like our life depends on it, and as you can see this is quite hard to get out, but so double pronged electrified standards go on the front fence, and then just normal standards on the secondary fence. We do have single prong electric fence standards, but they go into the kale. We keep these good ones for on the fodder beet, as a lot of you will know, if the cows get out and eat too much, they'll get acidosis, fall over and effectively die, worst case scenario. Just putting the two fences up the tram lines. They're a good distance away from each other, so if a cow slips under, it's going to get to that next one before it will slip under both of them at once. How this paddock will be fed out is there will be a cross fence come through, so we'll mathematically work out their allocation. They'll get a cross fence, then the next day another cross fence, and then there may be a small amount left on this run here, so they'll get that, but also we'll start moving the fence out. And this year is the first year that we have had 400 mil spacing between the rows of fodder beet. Of course, traditionally it has been 500 mil. So you're probably wondering what I was doing with this little handheld GPS, and it's quite simple, guys. In this end of the paddock, because the pivot goes round, this fence also follows the pivot, so it's not completely straight, and we have to work out how much of an area is in here. Now, what I'm going to do first is feed out the square part, and then we'll section off this triangle part. And so it's quite simple, guys. So we've got 80 meters down this long straight here, and then I'll go to the laneway over in that far corner and I'll measure 80 meters up, and then we'll make a line through here, and then we'll section off this part. This will be square, and obviously this part here will be triangle. Oh bloody hell, I'll put the camera exactly in the right spot. So now that I've explained all of this to you guys and how it's going to work, I best jump on the tractor and roll these brakes. You may be wondering why I roll two widths down these brakes, and it's quite simple. So the cows obviously walk through the kale, pushing it down, pushing it over, and it will start to lean on the fence, earthing the fence out, and then they can get out. Or in worst case scenario, we'll literally put the fence onto the ground so they can step over the wire and get out. now that I've got a good look at what the brake size and shape looks like, I've decided to fence this in half. So I'm going twice the depth but half the width, and so that makes the brake, the first two brakes, big squares, and that should open up the paddock in a responsible way, and so hopefully we don't have a breakout. dropped 4 bales and 4 feeders over there, and you're probably thinking, why haven't I dropped them in the paddock? And so the scenario is pretty easy on why we don't put this tractor into a kale paddock. So if you just turn your eyes up under here, as you can see, there's sensors here, there's sensors there, there's electronic componentry all over this transmission, and these guys here are pretty damn hard. As you can hear that, I'm hitting it on the tire and she is not breaking up at all. And so this kale stalk at the right angle will smash off any sensor or any plug, and so that's why we don't drive this tractor or the 76, the big tractor, inside a kale paddock. And it's quite simple the way that we start out these paddocks with the bale feeders and feeding out bales. We just use the old girl. Hey buddy, are you a little tired? Well, you're probably thinking that I should get onto that, but the pivots for the winter, they don't really move for us. So obviously this one is really easy care. It's on the grass. We've obviously put it here because we don't want it in the fodder beet. It can't move through the fodder beet because we've got all those fences up and standards everywhere, and so we don't want it moving through there. Also, the cows, if it was parked in the fodder beet, when the cows are in there, they will rub on everything, break things off, as the cows seem to be stronger than the little tire valves, but also the fence pushers. But of course there's electrical equipment as well. So this pivot will sit here for all of winter. It's quite easy, it's on grass, simple care. But this other big pivot, on the other hand, it is on winter feed solely. So obviously we've got the oats on this side and the kale on this side. The oats will be eaten off by calves, the kale will be eaten off by cows. The kale has got semi-permanent fences through it that we do not have springs on the wires, but the oats have still got the centre fence down the middle of the paddocks. Of course that's for us when we start feeding the oats out. Now we've left it in the oats because cows will be eating the kale, oats will be eaten by calves. Calves are generally, in this part of the world, smaller than a cow, so they'll do less damage to the pivot. Now typically they don't really do much damage at all, which is quite handy to us, but we'll be fencing it off when it is appropriate, once they have eaten off underneath the pivot. But there's one other thing that we do to the pivot. We switched the pivots off simply because a couple of years ago I woke up early for some random reason and decided I'll go start shifting the brakes now, get out there, and I had moved the rotorator away from a hedge line because we had a hedge trimmer coming. I caught that pivot 10 meters away from hitting that rotorator. So for some random reason it decided to wake up in the middle of the night and go for a wee walk, like a sleepwalk or something. So I like to always turn them off, and then you know they're not going to go anywhere.